Welcome back, guys, to yet another The War Within video. Today we are going to be going over a little bit about what the early access is, but also kind of what we can do during the early access days, right? We got 3 to 4 days depending on time zones and whenever you start playing. We don't know the exact full scope of what is available and what might not be available. The only information that we sort of really have is a old interview around the time that they actually announced the War Within for pre-order, which means that information could have easily changed. It might be a little different, but considering we haven't really heard anything else and the description on the pre-order is vague in itself, we kind of only have that information to go by. Now, this information is from a PC Gamer interview that they did with Ian Hazzikostas, right? The creative director, producer of World of Warcraft, and he said, obviously there's a whole interview about all of this stuff, but the most important part is this section of the interview, and it says some of the things that won't be available until reset, which is your first weekly reset, include the best items from rare spawn creatures, Mythic 0 dungeons, Mythic Plus, weekly profession cooldowns, and profession specialization points. Obviously, because my main focus on this channel is towards, like, you know, gold making aspects, we really care about these 2 points, weekly profession cooldowns and profession specialization points. It does not say that professions in themselves are completely disabled, which means there's still a very good chance that we'll be able to start on professions, but some of the weekly rewards that we can actually get from them are probably more limited. That does mean that there's a lot of things that we can actually get into, and even for non-profession related stuff, there's still a lot of things that you can actually prepare. But anyway, here's a couple of things that you can actually do in the early access, whether you're, you know, regular player that wants to do PvE, PvP, whatever, or if you are a gold maker like myself, and that's what I'm primarily going to focus on, and you want to get prepared as early as possible. So, number one, the best possible thing you could do during the early access is leveling tunes. When it comes to gold making purposes, once you've actually done your first level 80 in the War Within, everything else gets the adventure mode setting, which means that all the quests, all the zones and all that, they're fully unlocked. You actually get access to some world quests and things like that too. But it does mean that all the zones are scaled down to whatever level you are. So once you've reached that first level 80, that has to go through a campaign, you know, very linearly structured campaign. You can do it in whatever rotation that you want to do. You don't have to start on the Isle of Dorn, so you can go like straight to Ashkahet, whatever you want, right? But leveling, because of this, right, you want at least one level 80. And the reason you want at least one, except the fact, well, on top of the fact that you actually get, you know, all of the content scaled down to your level, when it comes to profession rewards and also eventually the weekly rewards and quests and things like that, when they open up after the early access, they will also be scaled down to your level. You don't actually need to be level 80 for almost any of the profession related things, right? If you want to do high-end, you know, boosting, right, or you want to do 2x4 farming in groups in the open world, that's something you would probably need to be level 80 for, just because, you know, you get the highest amount of eye level possible, and then you kill more mobs. And also the same thing if you want to do any kind of boosting, maybe even we have some level boosting opportunities early on, then that's what you want to go for. Another thing to consider, especially if you plan on leveling more characters through the War Within, is in this expansion, we actually get an experience buff. That is a stacking experience buff up to a total of 25%. And I'm logging in to show you guys real quick, because it's 5% per character that you get to level 80, which is pretty good, right? And then that's across your entire warband. And while we don't need to be level 80 early on in the War Within, we will eventually need to be level 80 for gold making reasons, right? But you'll be able to see here, warband mentored leveling experience gains increased by 10%. That's because I have 2 level 80s here on the beta. And you'll be able to find out that this actually goes all the way up to your lovely 25%. And you'll see here the next one is 15, and then there's 2 more on top of that, which is good. And if you can get 5 level 80s done in the early access when you have a lot of time to level anyway, then that's probably something that you should get done. Because as I mentioned before, once we get further into the War Within, as in 11.1 for example, there's a very high chance that some of the profession related stuff will require level 80, because in Dragonflight, when we had the first patch when the expansion launched, it was the same deal, right? Most things were completely farmable and learnable on a level 60 at that time, even a little bit lower than that, but level 60, let's just say that. And then when 10.1 rolled around and 10.2 rolled around, the new zones that you had to get into were end game max level zones, which meant if you wanted anything from those zones, you also needed to be max level. So because of that reason, getting to a point where you already have the 25% increased experience early on is really important, because think of it like this. If you have 25% increased experience on all of your ults, and then maybe a month into the War Within or earlier than that, you start leveling some of your ults. And if you do that, then at the time that you pick them up, they probably have full rested experience, and then you get the maximum amount of usage out of the rested experience on top of the 25% achievement, right? So I think that's a pretty good combo. Another thing to keep in mind is for new expansions, for example, for a level 70, if you don't log in to this character, it will not start collecting rested experience, which means once early access rolls around, or launch, if you don't start playing until then, make sure that you log in on every single one of your tunes. And as I just said, you want to do that because they will not start collecting rest experience without having at least being logged into at least once. So make sure you do that too. Now, another thing that I also recommend is picking up professions in general, right? Because it doesn't seem like, at least right now, it doesn't seem like professions are going to be disabled for the War Within early access. So we will be able to learn them, but the progress in the professions might be a little limited. But then if you have time, you want to max out the professions to the top possible point that you can, so they're ready to go once the official launch rolls around or the first reset rolls around, depending on how they actually do that timetable. And you're going to have a lot of time to be able to do this. And the reason why you also want to do that as early as possible is because you want to get yourself as much artisan security as you can, because this is something that you're going to be using on buying recipes. This is something that you're going to be using on buying knowledge points from certain vendors. Also, when you get to certain levels in your Renown, that's also something you will be using artisan security on to get more knowledge points. Now, speaking about Renown, which is kind of my next thing, getting as high as possible on these levels is going to be what you want. There's actually here, you'll find in a couple of these right here at number 12, and you'll see over here as well, right here at number 12. And then it's actually at 14 for Hello for Arafi. And Severed Threads is a little different because there's going to be vendors where you can buy some of it from. But if at all possible, getting to these particular Renown levels as quickly as possible, or at least before season 1, is going to be something that you want to do, because it's another 10 points of knowledge points for any of the professions that are impacted by this, right? You'll see here, Hello for Arafi, you may acquire profession knowledge for jewel crafting, herbalism, skinning, and leatherworking. And over here you'll see that it's going to be from mining, engineering, and inscription. And Council of Dornergold, you'll see that it's going to be for alchemy, blacksmithing, enchanting, and tailoring. So there's a widespread for whichever one is important. But something to keep in mind is in the War Within, these reputations are actually warband reputations, which means they're account bound. So whichever character that you start on is going to be, the baseline for all of them. And then when you log on to number 2, that will start at the same thing. So if I have 7, 6, 6, and 9 on this character, I log on to another one, that'll be the exact same. There's going to be a lot of warband collectible, like one-time things when you're doing the leveling campaign and certain side quests and things like that. But when it comes to world quests, you can actually still increase that number quite a bit. So having access to doing things that will increase your renown is something you want to do. Hence, also having more level 80s is going to be very nice, because once you're max level, you have access to the end game parts of a lot of zones, which, you know, you kind of don't have that. Even though a lot of stuff gets unlocked with adventure mode, it's not the full experience that a level 80 has. So keep that in mind. There's also a couple other things that you can do, you know, during early access. We can go around looking for farming spots and all that, but I don't really mind it. That's not really what this video is for. This is just like a general knowledge, or at least getting some more info out there for people that might have missed any of the well, not necessarily announcements around early access, because we haven't gotten any of those. And by the time that this video comes out, if we still don't have any, we might just be left with seeing what actually happens when early access starts. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it was a little bit of a yapping session, but I wanted to get this video out because there's a lot of community members that keep asking about the early access, and it's a little easier to have a video form to kind of explain some of these things in a more, you know, in a more concentrated way of having my thoughts laid out in a video form. But anyway, I appreciate you guys watching. If you did watch all the way to this point, make sure that you type monster down in the description. Not sponsored, by the way, but I'm drinking one, so that's why. Anyway, I appreciate you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.